We need to understand, when were the dinosaurs here? Now, dinosaurs didn't just show up one day and leave the next. They were here for a very, very long time. We're talking about 165 million years. Think about that. That's not a moment. That's an enormous stretch of time. For comparison, human beings have been around for only about 300,000 years. We're babies compared to the dinosaurs. We're nothing. The dinosaurs didn't all look the same, and they didn't all live at the same time. There were three main periods: the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. Most of the big dinosaurs that you know about, the Tyrannosaurus rex, the Triceratops, the giant long-necked sauropods, many of these only showed up in the last period, the Cretaceous. And the Cretaceous lasted about 79 million years. 79 million years. That's almost as long as all of human history times 500. Now here's what's beautiful about this. Dinosaurs evolved. They changed. They weren't the same creatures at the beginning of the Cretaceous as they were at the end. If you could somehow travel back in time and see the dinosaurs from 145 million years ago and then jump forward to 66 million years ago, you'd see an entirely different world. That's the thing about nature. It's constantly changing, constantly adapting, and the dinosaurs were the most successful land animals that ever existed during that time. But then something happened. 66 million years ago, something changed everything. Now, before we get to what happened, let me ask you something. If you were an alien civilization, advanced enough to travel between stars, what would you be interested in? Would you be watching dinosaurs? And if so, why? What would you want to understand about them? See, this is where most people get confused. They imagine aliens as villains or observers from some moral standpoint. But that's not how we should think about it. Let's just ask, what's the universe like? What's out there? These are the real questions. Here's what we know about our solar system. It's a pretty normal place, really. We have the sun, we have planets going around it, and on our planet, life emerged. Life emerged and it evolved for billions of years. And during a particular window of time, just a small window in cosmic history, dinosaurs dominated. They were extraordinary creatures. Some of them were the size of buildings. Imagine a brachiosaurus. Some estimates suggest they weighed 80 to 100 tons. Imagine something 100 tons walking around eating trees. It's incredible when you really think about it. But now, let's talk about what we actually know happened. This is where it gets interesting because the evidence is real and it's beautiful. 66 million years ago, a massive asteroid, and I mean massive, collided with Earth. We know this happened because we found the evidence. The asteroid was about 10 kilometers in diameter. Some of you might be thinking, well, 10 kilometers, that doesn't sound that big. But think about it differently. If you stacked 100 World Trade Centers on top of each other, you might get something close to that. And this thing was moving at tremendous speed. Tremendous speed. When it hit the Earth near what's now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, it created a crater 180 kilometers across. That's an enormous hole in the ground. But the crater itself wasn't the deadliest thing. The real killer was what happened afterward. When that asteroid hit, it released energy, unimaginable amounts of energy. It vaporized the rocks at the impact site. These were carbonate and sulfate rocks, and when you vaporize them, they release gases. They release sulfur dioxide and other compounds into the atmosphere. This caused acid rain, real, actual acid rain falling from the sky. But it gets worse. The impact threw up a massive cloud of dust and ash into the atmosphere. So much material that it blocked out the sun. Think about what that means. The sun, the source of energy for virtually all life on Earth, disappeared. Not forever, but for weeks, maybe months. Imagine if you went outside tomorrow and the sun was gone. Not gone forever, but gone for months. Imagine that world. The temperature drops. Plants can't photosynthesize because there's no light. And if plants die, everything that eats plants dies. And everything that eats those things dies. The whole food chain collapses. There's more. The impact created massive tsunamis, waves hundreds of meters high spreading across the oceans. And there was a thermal pulse. The energy released from the impact was so enormous that it heated the atmosphere. And this caused wildfires to break out across the planet, everywhere, all over the world at once. And to make matters even worse, and nature had some really bad timing here, around the same time, maybe slightly before or after, there was massive volcanic activity happening in India. These are called the Deccan Traps, enormous lava flows covering an area of nearly 200,000 square kilometers. These eruptions spewed more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, creating a greenhouse effect, warming the planet even more. So what did you have? You had darkness from the dust and ash. You had cold from the lack of sunlight. You had acid rain. You had wildfires. You had volcanic activity. You had the complete and utter disruption of the global food chain. Now here's the thing. Dinosaurs were adapted to their world. They evolved over millions of years to be perfectly suited to the conditions they lived in. They were incredibly successful, but they were not adapted to have their world destroyed in an instant. None of them were. Most of the dinosaurs died quickly. Within weeks or months after the impact, the vast majority were gone, but not all of them. Some smaller dinosaurs survived, some reptiles survived, some mammals survived, crocodiles made it through, turtles made it through, some birds made it through. In fact, the birds that survived eventually evolved into the birds we see today. So in a way, dinosaurs didn't completely disappear, they transformed into something new. Now, let me bring us back to the original question. If aliens were watching the dinosaurs, what would they observe? They would observe an absolutely extraordinary event. They would see a thriving world with animals unlike anything else we've ever seen. They would see creatures adapted perfectly to their environment. And then, in what would seem like an instant, even though it was 66 million years ago for us, it's still instantaneous on a cosmic scale, they would see the entire ecosystem change. They would see the extinction of nearly 75% of all species on Earth. But here's what's beautiful about this. And this is what I think would really interest an advanced civilization. They would see that life doesn't give up. After the dust settled, and it took time, it took thousands and thousands of years, new species started to emerge. Mammals began to diversify and adapt. Birds adapted and evolved. New plants emerged. Life bounced back. Life has this incredible resilience, this incredible ability to adapt and continue. So why would aliens be interested in this? Well, think about what it tells you. It tells you that the universe is not a stable place. It tells you that catastrophic events can happen. But it also tells you that life has an incredible ability to persist and adapt. If you're studying the universe, if you're trying to understand how life works, this is valuable information. Now you might ask, but Richard, do you think there actually were aliens watching the dinosaurs? And I'll tell you what I always say, I don't know. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know is actually okay. We should never pretend to know something we don't know. That's the fundamental principle. You must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. We don't have any evidence of aliens, none. We've looked and we haven't found anything. And that's fine. Science is about what we can measure, what we can test, what we can verify. Speculation about aliens is interesting to think about, but it's not science until we have evidence. But let me ask you something else. Let's say an advanced alien civilization did exist. What's the probability they would be around at the same time dinosaurs were here? The universe is about 13.8 billion years old. The Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. Dinosaurs were here for about 165 million years. That's a tiny, tiny fraction of Earth's history. The probability that an alien civilization would exist at exactly that time, develop spaceflight, and arrive at Earth to observe dinosaurs, well, you can see the problem. But here's what's interesting. The fact that we even ask this question tells us something about how we think. We're curious. We wonder. We want to know. We look at the evidence. We think about possibilities, and we ask, what if? That's the scientific mind at work. Now let's go back to the facts, because the facts are interesting enough. We know dinosaurs existed. We know they were here for an incredibly long time. We know they went extinct. We know roughly what caused it, and we know that life recovered. That's not speculation. That's evidence. How do we know all this? Well, we have fossils. Fossils are the remains of ancient organisms preserved in rock, and these fossils tell us a story. We can date them using radioactive elements. We can look at the layers of rock and see which animals existed at which times. We can find the iridium layer, that unusual amount of iridium in the rocks, which tells us about the asteroid impact. We can find charcoal in the rocks, which tells us about the wildfires. We can piece together a story from the physical evidence. The KP boundary, as it's called, that's the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary, is marked by this thin layer of clay all around the world. You can go to different continents and you'll find this same layer. It's full of iridium, an element that's rare on Earth but common in asteroids. This layer marks the moment when the asteroid hit. Above it, you don't find dinosaurs. Below it, you do. It's like the asteroid impact is written into the rocks themselves. Isn't that beautiful? The Earth keeps a record written in stone. So let's think about what an advanced alien civilization would see if they were observing Earth 66 million years ago. They would see a living, dynamic planet. They would see an ecosystem that had evolved over millions of years into an incredibly complex system. They would see dominance, the dinosaurs ruling the land, the pterosaurs ruling the sky, the mosasaurs and plesiosaurs ruling the seas, and then in an instant, well, in a few hours, if they were watching the asteroid come in, they would see catastrophe, they would see impact, they would see the creation of the crater, they would see the dust and ash rising into the atmosphere, they would see the temperatures drop, they would see the darkness, and then they would have to ask themselves, will life come back? Will this world recover? The answer is yes, life did come back, but it took time. It took hundreds of thousands of years for the dust to settle. It took millions of years for new species to evolve and fill the ecological niches left empty by the dinosaurs. You know what I find remarkable? 66 million years later, we evolved. We humans came into existence, and here we are looking back at this catastrophic event that happened long before we were here, trying to understand it. We're made of the same atoms that were here during the dinosaur extinction. The atoms in your body right now, some of them might have been in a dinosaur millions of years ago. You're made of stardust and ancient earth. You're connected to this entire history. So here's what I think about the question. Were aliens watching the dinosaurs? The real question isn't whether aliens were there. The real question is, what does it tell us about life? What does it tell us about our universe? And what does it tell us about ourselves? The fact is, life is remarkable. Life on Earth is remarkable, not because aliens were watching, but because it happened. Because for billions of years, life has been adapting, evolving, surviving catastrophe, and continuing. That's the real story. That's the story written in the rocks. The dinosaurs were here for 165 million years. They ruled the planet. They were successful beyond measure. And then a single event, one asteroid, 10 kilometers across, changed everything. And yet life continued. Life adapted, life evolved, and eventually it led to us. Now I could ask you, what does that mean for our future? What does it tell us about how fragile or how resilient life is? These are great questions. These are the questions that science helps us answer, not with certainty, but with evidence and reasoning and careful observation. You see, the beauty of science isn't that it gives you all the answers. The beauty is that it teaches you how to ask better questions. And when you ask better questions, you start to really understand the world. You start to really see what's going on. So the next time someone asks you, were aliens watching the dinosaurs? You can say, well, I don't know if aliens were there, but I know what was there. I know there was an incredible ecosystem. I know there was a catastrophic event. I know there was survival and adaptation and evolution. I know that we are, in a very real sense, the descendants of survivors. We are the products of billions of years of life, continuing even after tremendous obstacles, even after extinction events. And that's more interesting to me than aliens, because that's real, that's evidence, that's the universe as it actually is. Now, if you want to know more about this, and I hope you do, go look at the evidence. Look at the K-Peach boundary layer, read about the dinosaur fossils, understand radioactive dating, learn about how we know what we know, because that's where the real wonder is. Not in speculation, but in understanding. The dinosaurs are gone, but they're not forgotten. They're written in the rocks. They're written in the genes of every bird you see flying in the sky. They're part of the story of life on Earth. And you're part of that story too. You're part of the universe figuring itself out. That's what I love about this. That's what makes it real.